If life in North American Gurukulas seemed brutal, well, Ben Bresic may have had it even worse. Now living in Florida, Ben treasures time alone with his son, kind of parent-child contact he never knew himself growing up.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, right.
Flick it out a little bit. I never remember living with my mother. My mother sent me to school in '72. I was born in '69, and that was the last time I lived with my mother in my entire life.
Like many Hare Krishna boys, Ben was shipped off to a boarding school in India.
The running water was gravity fed from the roof. It was completely bacteria filled. We had dysentery. We didn't have flushable toilets. The living conditions were extreme. That's to put it bluntly. We didn't have any glass in our holes. There was bars. It was a prison.
This is like going back to like middle-aged Europe. Prabhupada said when we were sent to India, we should learn to be happy begging for our food on the street.
Nirmal Hickey, now also living in Florida, shared many of Ben Bresic's childhood traumas.
Well, I've cried. I've cried more than I would ever want to know. I've cried like a lot. Years I've cried, spent crying.
They were building a $10 million temple out of granite right there, 100 feet from where we lived. Not like somewhere else, right there. And there was a couple hundred students there that didn't have enough food, medical care. They were giving us shots for malaria and stuff with used needles. I mean, I had a needle break inside my arm. There's no excuse for that.
Every day we'd have to recite the 10 offenses. And before we ate, every time we'd eat, we'd have to recite in the language that they use and in English, this prayer that's about our food. My dear Lord, this material body is a lump of ignorance. The senses are networks of paths leading to death. Somehow or other, I have fallen into this ocean of material sense enjoyment. Of all the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and difficult to control. But you have given us this food to help us overcome the tongue. So now let us take this food, and in so doing, glorify your lordships.
They just didn't care about us children. They didn't care. They were more interested in building temples and propagating or trying to build their empire big to attract followers.
Yet again, former students blame their teachers. But in India, much of the alleged abuse was sexual.
It was the teachers, it wasn't anybody else. That one of the teachers in India was so flaming. I mean, he dressed in dresses, he wore dresses, he was, it was obvious. I mean, and then there was these older Indian kids that were there, and they were like bringing kids in their room at all hours of the night, you know, with the door open.
I was anally molested. I gave oral sex to men. Any type of possible. One guy stuck his foot in my anus. I mean, one teacher. I mean, I'm just telling you, any level of sexuality can be. I was raped in my sleep while I was sick by men. I mean, you know, had no bigger people than me. I was just a kid. I could not even move. There's no chance of fighting or whatever. I just took it as it may.
Ben knew it was painful, but he didn't know he was being victimized. He was isolated from parents, from law enforcement, from Western culture. As he grew older, he tried to complain.
And they said that I was a habitual liar and that I was a demon trying to overthrow their movement at the age of 10. They said that I was just a bad kid. And in reality, I was a kid that was dying.
Nirmal had been suffering for years. When he was 6, he spent 3 lonely months in a hospital after falling into a vat of boiling milk at this Krishna boarding school in France.
No follow-up care, never brought to the doctor to look at the burns again after that.
Deeply depressed, Nirmal considered suicide.
I went on the roof and I was like standing up there on the rail, like putting one foot off the edge, like, you know, sort of waiting for somebody to come up, and talk me down, hope, I guess subconsciously anyway. None of the teachers came up. I told them I was going to kill myself, and they just sort of like, go ahead.
It only served to make Nirmal angrier. Yet by the mid-1980s, the little boys who had been such easy targets were growing up.
The kids that they had been used to abusing were getting big, and that was not easy. It was a couple of us were contemplating, revenge.
And I was just a child, and there was no reason why I had to suffer through that. I came from a decent family in this country. There was no reason why I had to be subjected to those tortures. I was not born in India. I didn't have to go through that.
By the mid-1990s, the top brass in ISKCON dropped their curtain of silence and openly confronted the mounting charges of abuse.
It's terrible, it's heart-wrenching, it's horrific, it's saddening. We could use so many words.
Including the words, "It's true."
Unfortunately, many individuals affiliated with our organization at that time abused children.
Anudama Das and the rest of the Krishna's governing body agreed to commission an independent investigation. Most of the former students' allegations were confirmed and then made public in a report by Professor Burke Rochford.
And I think people within the movement were facing the tragedy of what had happened, and were seeing this as a way for the movement to finally acknowledge, recognize, and begin to do something to deal with this issue, which in ways they have. Have they done it perfectly? Have they done enough? I think not. But nonetheless, the fact of the matter is that this is the way that this particular story has come out. I suspect that there are very few people in the United States and throughout the world who haven't picked up a newspaper and have read about, in their own countries, about a particular church or particular denomination where there has been allegations of child molestation on the part of priests or other clergy. That's something that is more commonplace than I think people would want to admit to.
And no one should think, because I'm not Catholic or I'm not Hare Krishna or I'm not Native American, that my kids aren't at risk or this can't happen in my institution, because everybody's at risk and everybody should be very, very, very careful.
These days, the center of Krishna activity in North America is in the reclaimed swampland of Alachua in north-central Florida, on property donated in large part by a great-grandson of Henry Ford.
He used to wear these really thick glasses. Bottle.
Not far from the Alachua temple, Nirmal Hickey leads a crusade against the Krishnas. Using the internet, Nirmal built a network of former Gurukula students who reject ISKCON's offer of money for counseling.
It's too late for that. It's way too late for that, It's just beyond that.
Nirmal is in a wheelchair, a quadriplegic, an injury sustained when he fell out of a tree at a Hare Krishna farm when he was 16.
I've never experienced this before. I can't move any of my body. I can't. That's what I was thinking. I didn't know about broken neck. I didn't know what a spinal cord was. I didn't know anything like that.
Two devotees in a house adjacent to the tree brought out a plyboard, like a half-inch.
They didn't want bad publicity. Plus, there was a whole part of the philosophy that said, this was a thing we heard like every day more than once, you're not your body. So, don't be attached to your body. It doesn't mean anything. If Krishna loves you, he'll take everything away from you to make you surrender. That was the line. And so, for whatever reason, they didn't brace my neck. They rolled me onto my side. They carried the plyboard and they put it in the back of one of the temple cars.
Nirmal and other former students turned to Dallas lawyer Wendell Turley. In 1997, Turley convinced a Texas jury that years of sexual abuse by a Catholic priest should cost the Archdiocese of Dallas $119 million. He later settled with the church for $23.4 million.
I can't speak for what's in the mind of all the 100-plus victims that we represent, but I see it like this. Mostly, these now young adults need vindication, and they need validation. They were made to believe that they were to blame for the bad things that happened to them.
In June 2000, Turley filed a civil complaint against the International Society of Krishna Consciousness and the estate of Prabhupada, seeking $400 million in damages.
We need to impress upon institutions, even religious institutions, that you're not immune from the obligations and responsibilities you have to children. You have to look out for their welfare. And in the United States, First Amendment or not, you cannot mistreat and injure children, even if you do it in the name of your God.
There have been some, I think a minority for sure, but who are very angry with the plaintiffs in this particular case because of the suit itself has implicated Prabhupada.
We have alleged that he did know about some of the sexual abuse. We've alleged that he knew about the physical beatings. We have alleged that he knew about some of the general conditions under which these children were being kept, particularly in during the mid-70s.
I think the responsibility falls on Prabhupada, really, that it was his system. He devised it. We were his servants. We did what he wanted with our children. We thought he had a divine vision of how they should be raised.
Jeffrey Hickey could be a key witness. He was the man in charge of all the Gurukulas during much of the abuse.
And I think a lot of people point their fingers at me, saying because I was the Minister of Education, it should have been my responsibility to see that these things didn't happen. I was doing what Prabhupada wanted. His instructions are clear.
Jeffrey Hickey is also the father of Nirmal Hickey. Jeffrey is often consumed with guilt.
For sure. Looking back on my decision to become a follower of Bhaktivedanta, I can see that it was a reckless decision. It was a risk that I was taking.